I love animation, and chances are you too. But what I mean by that is that I enjoy every aspect of it. So I want to make this video to show all the different ways this media succeed. Sometimes the beauty of it comes from different styles, and that's why I'm counting only 5 of my favorite films in each kind of animation. I'm counting standalone films, so any film coming from a previous series is going to be ignored. Beware, this is a showcase, so my goal is to push you to watch some of these films, or at least appreciate them in some aspect. Without anything else to say, it's showtime! Let's start with the weird ones. With the increasing popularity of CGI, there's a lot of live action films that incorporate animation in its process, but it is often done in one of two ways, either as separate segments or as constant elements in the story. In the first one, we have films with minor animated segments like Enchanted, or movies with little portions of live action like Balto and the Lego Movie. The other case is the most popular right now, with movies like Avatar and The Jungle Book, trying to blur the line between animation and live action. But the one I want to talk about does not try to make a realistic approach to the characters, at least in the visuals. Films using clearly animated characters in real environments. These are Space Jam, Cool World, and Mary Poppins, in which the characters interact with this animated world. So the best example of them all is no other than Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
My buddy Betty B, a sourpuss you'll see, but when I'm done he'll leave no gun to the joker.
In most recent years, these movies have taken the 3D approach and made poorly written films. But Roger Rabbit embraces the silliness of animation and mixes it with an interesting detective plot. The animation shows a master degree of movement, with little details like Roger's ears constantly reacting accordingly to his emotions, and the camera constantly moving around the characters, something most animation studios believe to be extremely difficult, and thus forbidden at the time. There's a constant impact of animated characters in the world. Every object reflects their weight and movement, and even use real objects like guns and cigars. The dialogue also takes this into account, with scenes mainly involving Jessica Rabbit, speaking about the problems of being a cartoon, and personalities like Roger's keeping the lighthearted style of animation. The actors deliver all this not from a voice actor perspective, but as a full performance like in every other movie, doing voices and acting on set, and finally giving a believable eye-to-eye interaction. Seriously, Charles Fleischer dressed as Roger Rabbit can be unseen. This was one of the hardest projects of its time, but since 3D animation became so accessible, these projects became less and less impressive. There's still passion behind this kind of storytelling, so let's hope for a still improving implementation. In the meantime, Who Framed Roger Rabbit is the number one in this area. Keeping the physical object implementation, stop-motion animation earns a spot due to the incredible work required to animate this kind of sets. While this kind of animation doesn't necessarily need a cartoon-ish aesthetic, it is a trend well appreciated. Unfortunately, the digital era is taking most of the jobs this style used to do. That's why the only two main studios surrounding this kind of media are Aardman with Wallace and Gromit and Shaun the Sheep, and Laika with Coraline and Paranorman. There are some less famous gems like Mary and Max, but the focus still lies in those studios. What I want to showcase is the one that created an opening on this kind of art to shine, the Burton and Selig film, The Nightmare Before Christmas. The scenery behind this work is a distinct style on a lot of subsequent stop-motion films, and the main reason this one became so popular. Stop-motion lacks the fluent movement of traditional animation, so pairing it with a dark tone is the best way to maximize the end result. Also, the contrast between gloomy and disturbing visuals with curious and well-intended characters gives a better experience than just plainly going for either style. Also, it's the only movie I truly enjoy on both Christmas and Halloween. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of musicals, but I do enjoy most of these songs. particularly Sally's Song and Poor Jack. Being the second one, the reason I love so much this film. For me, the main point of the story is the realization that there's nothing wrong with trying new things, if you give it your best, and that failure may help you grow, becoming better in other parts of your life. This logic could be applied to the whole stop motion genre, and it looks like it's growing bigger and bigger. Productions like Kubo and the Two Strings are showing the improvement of it, so let's support this art, so it can deliver more amazing works. As we all know, 3D animation is becoming the norm here in the West, spamming a lot of love or hate franchises, like Ice Age, the first one was okay, Despicable Me, the first one was okay, and Kung Fu Panda, the second one was amazing. And some original works like The Book of Life, Source Up, and Gahul. But for me, the final battle was between Disney, Pixar, and DreamWorks, with Zootopia, Inside Out, and How to Train Your Dragon respectively. Since I already gave 2 spots to a Disney related production, and the next one is definitely going to one of them, I'm giving the spot to How to Train Your Dragon, again, the first one. This movie is as cliché as it gets in some aspects, having the classic outside-the-box thinker and understanding over previous moral and a full action climax. I always think originality is a minor factor on determining the worth of any piece of art, but the execution is what really matters. The geniality comes from the way things are explained. Hiccup is awkward due to his lack of strength, but shows passion on learning about dragons. Every new discovery is justified through this train of thought, from his first steps to the climax. From beginning to end, the plot surrounds these discoveries, rather than using a deus ex machina that justifies action. 3D animation gives a sense of detail and surroundings, easier to obtain than in 2D, which this movie takes advantage on, particularly in the flight scenes. Also, the different dragons have a distinct design, coming from anatomy to color and skin texture, something only possible in this kind of animation. All these qualities keep the feeling of discovery fresh and a constant curiosity from the viewer. This kind of animation is improving in themes and style, so the future looks bright in this medium. I was saving the classics for the final 2 spots, but since traditional animation has such broad different styles, I decided to split it into Western and Eastern animation. The story behind traditional Western animation is huge. In the 80s, we had Don Blunt's The Land Before Time, An American Tale, and The Secret of Nim. In the late 90s, DreamWorks productions like Road to El Dorado and The Prince of Egypt, and the Warner's The Iron Giant. But the most famous studio that has been around most of the time is Walt Disney Animation Studios. Like I previously said, musicals are not my favorite genre, but I still love movies like Mulan, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and The Princess and the Frog. But my actual favorite movies from this studio are the gorgeous Fantasia, the hilarious Emperor's New Groove, the mysterious Great Mouse Detective, and, in the same cheesy feeling, the adventurous The Rescuers.
To accept the mission to Australia.
Australia?
Both films deserve some attention, so I'm cheating a little here. Something I will do a lot in this kind of showcases. The first one has a more lugubrious scenery, with a constant sense of fear from the main kid. The animation also feels messier, with more disturbing backgrounds. The Rescuers Down Under is more action focused, and while the world feels more dangerous, has a more brute force feeling to it, less psychological. Still, the comedy shines in this one, and the always constant awkwardness of Bernard and the fabulousness of Bianca make an interesting duo to follow too. The animation is a lot more polished, and here we see animated flight scenes as impressive as in the previous number. With all these mouse stories, there's something intriguing in the little world underneath us, and how the little people make a difference. Hand-drawn animation has a long story in entertainment, and the digital era makes this kind of films easier to obtain. Unfortunately, most of the West has already moved on to the 3D visuals, but there's still some studios trying to keep this up. This is a different story in the East. Eastern animation is my favorite, I know, be shocked. And Japan is the king at this kind of style. We have the impressive scenery of Makoto Shinkai in 5 cm per second and the Garden of Words, the character-driven stories of Mamoru Hosoda with Summer Wars and the Gear Who Lived Through Time, the environmental focus of Hayao Miyazaki in Princess Mononoke and Castle in the Sky, the classic sci-fi works of Mamoru Hoshi's Ghost in the Shell and Katsuhiro Otomo's Akira, and even animation quality pinnacles like Redline by Takeshi Koike. This was the hardest category to choose one from, and it should be a whole list in its own. But since I have to pick one, I will choose first a director with the best technique in my opinion, the fast and smooth editing of Satoshi Kon. I will say my two favorites are Millennium Actress and Paprika, being the last one my top choice. His animation has a distinct use of cuts, transitions, and character expressions. He knew when to let a scene last and when to move on fast, mostly letting the audience with the same feeling as the characters. His only trope may be the idea of escaping to other worlds, but this, along his natural way of depicting characters, was ahead of his time. In Millennium Actress, this constant overlap of words represents how messy memories can be, a narrative only possible in animation. There are constant fade-outs that reflect the change of moments, but do not take the focus away from the characters. These are done with slightly differences so the shot doesn't feel unnatural, like imitating a live-action film. The diverse settings are easier in this medium, but not impossible to do on a live-action setting. Paprika is the most technically impressive of all his films. Just the first 10 minutes are good enough to be considered the peak of his style. Here, the impossible blends with the possible, and the line between imagination and realism is non-existent. Trying to achieve this kind of cinematography is only possible in animation, and that's why I think this is the top of the industry. His complete involvement as a director was 10 shortly years, due to his own death. That was enough to leave an impact in the animation media and in the world. That's why I recommend watching his 4 main movies and 1 TV series. A once-in-a-generation kind of artist, his whole way of editing is an inspiration for everyone that slightly knows how difficult this process can be. So everyone out there wishing to work on the media or just editing videos, take notes and always try to come up with new ways to improve your work. This has been the All-Arounder Geek, Master of Nothing, Apprentice of Everything. And remember, this is an amazing time to be alive.